Hi, everyone. I'm very honored today to bring you a person who's been on the Virtual Light broadcast many times. Good friend of ours, too. He's done a lot of work here. James Honeycutt, PhD, has done some incredible work here. His company is called NuTesla. He's brought many of these products on the show to show us kind of how they work and some of the fascinating ways that he worked. This is the guy that actually taught me the word entrainment and how our world works when we can entrain ourselves and how we have kind of reversed that a little bit. So let me bring him in here. James, how you doing?
Doing great, Steve. Thank you for having me on today.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you here. We're doing this whole thing about the future, and you are one of the people that have really looked ahead. A lot of your inventions, a lot of the products that you've sold here and some of the other things are all about some of these wonderful things in the future. And I wanted to kind of get a little vision from you of what you think is coming and some of the areas to really look for in here.
Happy to do that. That'll be a lot of fun to share this with you.
You bet. Well, you go right ahead, my friend. I'm going to kind of step back and interview you as we need to.
Okay. Well, let me give you a little more background. About 20 years ago, I worked at Microsoft, and I was one of the architects responsible for designing their future wireless, wired, and video networks that ran on the campus up in Redmond, Washington. There were three of us, and we would often describe our job when people would say, "So what do you do for Microsoft?" We would describe it as reading the tea leaves. Our responsibility was to work with the current equipment providers and manufacturers and listen to their discussions about where they were going with their future products and ideas, and talk to the customers and that. And literally plan things out 5 years in advance. Our vision was what's happening, how do we make investments today to plan for what's going to be happening in 5 years from now. So it was a lot of fun. It was very interesting kind of work. One of the things that came out of that was a realization of my ability to connect the dots, to see disparate discussions, ideas, and then see how those things actually fit together. And that served me well in my life. So rather than looking for the differences in things, I look for the similarities. And that's helped me see patterns that have been evolving. And a lot of looking forward involves looking backwards. Right. Now, technology and its future is, we talk about this, a very broad subject. And so I want to focus on just a couple of areas of that. And in thinking about this, I was thinking about the grand convergence that occurred in December of 2012. Mm-hmm. And the year 2012 itself was a year of a lot of anxiety, and people were uncertain what was going to happen. Certainly wasn't at all like what was happening in 1999 when we were entering the new millennium. Right. But there were changes that were happening, and people were concerned. And then we learned about this convergence, and what happened is our planet lined up with its solar, our own sun, which lined up with Alcyon, which lined up with Sirius, which lined up with the great central sun. That convergence itself was, once every 5,000 plus years, but more importantly, we learned about this orbit that our solar system goes around, where we enter this plane, that's P-L-A-N-E, of highly charged cosmic particles. And we had been outside of that plane for the last 5,000 years. We were literally in darkness, and we started to enter into light at this great convergence in December of 2012. And so for most people, 2013 became a year of awakening. And it was interesting, as I talked with people, they began to see new things. They began to wake up to what was going on in the world. And they didn't make a lot of changes, but they started studying and understanding these things. And then 2014 comes along, and that's been truly a year of change. People have applied what they've learned over the last year and a half, and are making changes in their lives. I was surprised, just all of the people I know that have been making tremendous changes, big changes,
ones, yes.
Life changes, changes this year, because they've had a chance to do this. Well, our whole solar system entered this plane of highly charged cosmic particles. So it's affected everyone, not just those who are searching for enlightenment or those who are enlightened. It's affected everyone. And those who aren't aware of what that is have been a little bit hesitant, or they've been shocked by it. And whenever we see this kind of awakening occur, there will always be a balancing side of that, those on the dark side who try to find ways to control that. So when we talk about technology, technology in and of itself is in a way neutral. It's up to those who deliver it and use it to decide whether to use it for good or to use it for bad. And so we have to be careful about how we apply this. And one of the things that technology is it should always be viewed as training wheels. It should be an enabler.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So, you know, there's communications is one of the areas that is just tremendously growing as we go forward like this. I've worked in the communications field my entire life. I've worked from these old teletype terminals that were the size of a desk to where we now have cell phones that you can, you know, use text-to-speech and voice recognition, and we don't have to type anymore. We have amazing technologies at our hands, but we have to decide how to use that. And I was talking with somebody recently about Bluetooth headsets, and they were really concerned about how dangerous Bluetooth headsets are. And my comment to her was, when I'm driving in my car, I'm a lot more likely to get hurt in an accident if I'm talking on my phone than if I'm using a Bluetooth headset.
That's true.
I'm going to trade out that little bit of time that I need to have that on my ear in exchange for the safety that I'm going to have, because it's much more likely that I'll get hurt if I do that, or I'll get a ticket, which happens in this world today too. But technology, it's an enabler. It is a tool that we decide to use. And there are boundaries on how far we should allow this technology to enter our lives. I herald the wounded warrior who comes home from defending our rights from war and has lost a limb. And we have these new neuronic, neural-connected, if you will, prosthetics that allow them to walk and to run, that allow them to hold their child or to hug their spouse or their parents. And that's such an amazing tool.
Yep.
But at the same time, there are boundaries that I don't want to have something like that put into my body just so that I can get through an airport security check faster, or cross a border with less hassle, or make a purchase by swiping my hand over an RFID reader. There are boundaries at which we want to accept this technology. So we've got to look at those things whenever we have that as an option. Going back to Microsoft, when they first developed what they called NetMeeting, which is a forerunner to Skype. It was a video conferencing piece of software that was included in Windows 95. They discovered 6 months after they had rolled this out that the single largest user of NetMeeting was for pornography. And
was who? Who was it?
Pornography.
Really?
Yes. And Microsoft, I remember, because this was part of my role, as I was in that meeting, and they were talking about what do we do with this? Do we turn this off and not make this feature available because of how it's being used? And it was a real dilemma for them. And they chose, and I think rightly so, that they needed to develop the technology, put the controls in place, educate people as to how this is being used, and let people choose for themselves. It's all about our choice. And we have to have the responsibility to make the choices. And that's how we're going to be judged, is by that choice that we make, not by limiting it. And so whenever I look at technology, I want to see technology that lets me make that choice, not something that inhibits me and limits what I can do.
That's fascinating, because the group has said before that pornography was actually one of the things that built the internet. It actually funded the internet in the beginning. So,
yes.
So you're right. The way we use it has much more to do with it. That's fascinating.
Yes. And so we look at those kinds of things. As people will, technology again as training wheels. I remember the first time I went to the Monroe Institute to learn how to achieve these states of expanded awareness that we talk about being an out-of-body experience. And one of the things, I think the fourth day into the week, they told us, tomorrow you're not going to listen to the tapes. You're going to have to achieve these same states of awareness without the binaural beats. And every one of us freaked out, thinking, "Oh, we can't do this. We've been having these things play in our ear telling us." And so we went back to our little units, closed the blinds. There was this, voice telling us, "Go ahead and get into your position," and silence. And across the board, all of us were able to achieve that same state of expanded awareness without the tapes. It was scary. It was the same feeling as being that 5-year-old kid on the bicycle and dad letting go of the handlebars. It was exciting because we realized that we had learned a new tool that we could use without being dependent. I didn't need to carry a cassette recorder around with me to listen to tapes to achieve these states of awareness. I now was on a springboard that I could go do greater things. And so I view our products the same way. Now, Somnius, talking about technology, Somnius is something that we use for sleep, and people will often ask me, well, if I use this to sleep, am I going to have to always use Somnius to sleep? And my answer to them is that, well, if you don't make the changes in your lifestyle that have led to this problem of insomnia, then yeah, you're going to have to use it. But unlike a pharmaceutical sleep aid, there aren't any ill effects that you need to worry about on some kind of long-term use. And if your insomnia is a result, if it's secondary because of an illness that you've got going on that you need to treat, then you need to deal with that illness in order to stop using the Somnius if that's what you want to do. I've been sleeping on it for the last 10 years, and I'll go for periods of time without using it just to see what happens. And it's interesting because I'll be fine for a few nights, and then all of a sudden, slowly, I'll begin to notice that my sleep patterns have reverted to unhealthy ones because it's just the busyness that's going on in our lives. People ask me, well, is this, what makes this safe? And, I have to mention something kind of interesting. My grandma Honeycutt passed away just this last December in 2013. She was 100 years old. And she had been sleeping on one of our sleep waivers for almost 10 years. And it was, and she slept on average about 12 hours a night just because of her age and activity, etc. And the only thing that really caused her to pass was that she fell and broke her second hip. And at 100 years old, she broke the first hip at 95, and that didn't slow her down. But Grandma was an amazing woman who has seen the technology progress since she was born in 1913 all the way, and we would talk about this, where it's going and this stuff. She used a cell phone. It's just amazing, I think. And when her eyesight went out, she started reading books by listening to them on tape. She'd have her great-granddaughter take her to the library, and she would check out books on tape, and she would listen to at least one full book every week until that last month. It was amazing.
That is amazing.
And so there's another place where technology was able to help fill that. We use technologies, we see that growing. Technology tends to shrink and get smaller and smaller, and we see lower and lower power. Friends of mine that work, I'm up in the Northwest, and I have friends that work at Intel, and we talk about where the chips are going and what they're doing with these chips. They use silicon wafers, and they keep reducing the size, and they're moving these electrons through these wafers with less and less voltage, and reducing the amount of power and allowing this thing to run faster and cooler. And it continues to just amaze me how that's going.
It is. Yeah, a friend of ours, actually one of the people we've had on in one of these interviews, Joey Sorrentino, works for a rather large chip manufacturer, and he basically quoted Moore's Law, I think he said it was called, where the chips get half the size or twice the computing power in 16 months. And
yes.
that now we're at this point where there's this huge explosion ready to take place because of all these things that are all bundling up here. Everything's gonna be exponential from this point forward. It's amazing, absolutely amazing.
You've seen the movie Lucy?
No, I haven't, not yet.
You should see the movie Lucy. I don't like to really make pitches for movies, but
I'm fascinated with the promos for it. It's exciting.
It's an amazing theory about what happens when you unlock the potential of the brain.
Right.
And if you want to see where technology is going and how useless it's going to be once we unlock our brain,
that's it.
See Lucy. It is a violent movie. I won't deny that. It was strong, but at the same time, Morgan Freeman and Scarlett Johansson did tremendous jobs in portraying this migration of unlocking the potential of the brain and what we can do. And I think about that in context to technology. You know, it's interesting, we should never think of technology as a crutch, and yet without technology, we wouldn't be able to have the Skype call.
That's right.
I think about technology and communication and recognize that at the same time, there's this explosion in telepathic abilities. And people who are communicating telepathically now, it's so common. And you know what it's like with Barbara, with being able with your wife to have the same thoughts at the same time, not even being in the same room or within miles of each other. You pick up the phone and you text your wife, and she gets it and goes, "That's just what I was thinking about." That connection is real and it's instantaneous, and that's just growing, and we're seeing that happen with more and more people. So the time is coming when that is going to be more of a commonplace as technology grows up. Now, there'll be a counterfeit in the meantime, and that is people who will be able to implant devices into their heads and communicate wirelessly to somebody else, and it will appear to be a telepathic communication. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that we have got to watch out for. We've got to be sensitive to those who are deceitful. And I think that's one of the things with technology is that we need to apply that sixth sense within us, that that feeling that we have, to know whether this is something positive or negative, and follow on those particular guidelines.
That's beautiful. Well, it's kind of funny because what you're saying is exactly what the group said several years ago. I don't know if you remember it or not, but several years ago we had this big scare about something called the singularity. And they were talking about the computers reaching a point where they could outthink a human. Would they take over at that point? Would they basically take us over? And of course there's all kinds of scary movies that came from that and so forth. But what the group said about it was pretty simple. They said that we don't need to worry about that. We do need to watch how we use these training wheels. I love that analogy. But what they said was when we get to that point, we will integrate that and we won't need the technology. That's exactly what you're saying.
Yes. We're seeing an expansion occur, talking about communications and the wireless web. I remember AT&T about 15 years ago talking about the time when every home would have a wireless repeater in it, and you'd have this web that would just be what's called ad hoc. It would just be a pop-up, so that every home, every apartment had a wireless device sitting outside of the house, and they would all be connected together. And you wouldn't need what we call broadband internet today, which is this wide area network that you work with your cell phone. You could literally just hop from house to house to house with these communication signals. And we're seeing that come about more and more now. It's amazing. And people have got to learn that if you have wireless in your home, you need to secure it. You need to lock that down because it's so easy. Not that people are going to necessarily get into your computer and hack your network, but getting through your home network, they can get to the internet, which your home network is uniquely identified by an IP address, and they can send messages that, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, are being monitored by government authorities. And you can have people sending messages that will appear to have come from your home that could alert the NSA or somebody else, some other three-letter acronym, to potentially illegal activities that are happening on your behalf, when in fact it's simply because your network wasn't secured at home. So you've got to watch these things. That security and protection have always got to be a part of anything that rolls out. It was interesting that this new control for automobiles that allows a OnStar. You're familiar with OnStar. They can remotely unlock your car or start your engine or turn the engine off or disable your car so you don't make your payments. You can't get in and drive your car. If the car gets stolen, they can disable it so that the person can't drive away with it. And they've shown how this technology can be hacked. Well, the next step from that, of course, are these, we're doing that to cars, now we're doing it with bodies. We're implanting these devices into the body that are designed to be recharged. They have a very small battery that's recharged like your toothbrush, wireless recharging. We should talk about that briefly. But they've discovered that they can treat a lot of neurological conditions with these very small implantable electronic devices. And when they were interviewing the people that were developing this, they asked the question about, so can you hack this? Can you cause somebody to have a neurological or cardiological event by sending a signal that would cause this to happen? And they said, well, it's possible, but we're not doing anything to secure this. We'll wait until something happens.
Until something happens.
And I was like, oh, this is just...
But isn't that what just happened recently with the cloud itself? The way we are distributing things now through the cloud system and all the different distribution points all over the world. Nobody ever thought about what happens when they hack into one of them, and that's just happened. It just happened in different ways. We're finding out it's just not as secure as we thought it was, but incredible technology. We're all using it. Most of you are probably watching this on the cloud because we broadcast on the cloud. So yeah, very fascinating things. Magical.
So one of the things interesting about that is that the Windows 8 includes an encryption tool called BitLocker, but most people don't even know what that is. And so they just assume their computer is safe because they know that the file system is encrypted, blah, blah, blah. But as soon as you transmit anything outside of your computer and you trust on the encryption of that carrier or whoever's on the cloud, then you've opened yourself up to that kind of thing. And I think more and more people need to understand that they need to encrypt their files before they send them. It needs to become a standard process. And interestingly, our government establishes limits as to how encrypted you can send a file. In fact, encryption technologies are considered munitions. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
If you sell technology to another country that has encryption as part of it, it has to be below a certain level. Otherwise, you're in violation of a munitions treaty, and you can be arrested on federal charges.
Oh, my God.
It's one of our first concerns. We use encryption in our products when we sell them, and when they go overseas, fortunately, the encryption is never exposed to the user, so there's no licensing requirements inside of it. But that's one of the issues with encryption technology, and the government wants the right to be able to decrypt the message. It may take them months to do it, but eventually they want to be able to decrypt the message. The whole idea was to prevent the regular hacker from getting in and looking at detailed contents, but still allow a way to protect and preserve the security of our homeland. And we'll let people take that.
Fascinating. I didn't know that. So they basically limit the encryption so that they can get into it.
Yes. It's still very encrypted. It's still very
sure. Well, yeah, 128-bit encryption is a pretty big deal. So yeah.
And you can go up to 256-bit with them and not have an issue. Now you're talking Cray computers and it's like password changing. How many of us use the same password for all of our online accounts? So if they break one, all of them. And I recently, I now use like about a 20-character password for my most secure files. And I've been going through and changing all of my passwords online just for that reason. Is that there's so many breakdowns of that basic level of security that people lose the password and it gets taken from them. That they think that I'm still surprised that four number pins are still all that's required for banking. That's a little concerning as well. But with technology, we're seeing an increase in what are called biometrics as well. So we're seeing more and more laptops and tablets that have thumb readers, even retina scanners, so that only the person that's supposed to use it can use it. They've built that technology into firearms so that only the owner of that firearm can use it. There's appropriate places for this technology, and we're seeing that grow. But again, when it comes to communications, I want to just kind of close that out and say that we're seeing this expansion of wireless. 20 years ago, if you were a telephone company, literally half of your investment was buried in the ground. It was the copper cabling that connected homes to central offices and central offices to central office, and was literally copper wire that was in the ground. That was half of their investment. Their net value was copper they had dug out of the ground, spun into cable, and put back in the ground to connect people up together. And so it was a long time to get the phone companies to finally jump on board with high-speed data, because those buried copper wires were not well suited for high-speed communications. And then there were changes in the technology that allowed them to work that way. But now we're seeing more and more fiber to the desk, fiber to the curbside, so that we're having these higher speed connections that are going on now. And the importance of that buried copper is going away, and we're seeing a wireless expansion. And not just terrestrial, we're seeing celestial wireless, the satellite systems. More and more communication satellites are being launched to give us broader coverages in places where there is no terrestrial infrastructure to support those communications. So these satellites that are going up are amazing. They are large. They are designed to run for many, many years. A lot of satellites, maybe a lot of people don't know this, some of them are solar powered, but we do have nuclear powered, fusion powered satellites up there. Very, very small nuclear reactor on it. It's not something that's going to cause any kind of wide scale explosion or problem that gets portrayed. It's interesting, you're based in Las Vegas. I grew up in Las Vegas. Went to Las Vegas High School, graduated from there. The original Las Vegas High School was near downtown. But I remember in middle school, we had somebody come out and talk to us from the Nevada test site about nuclear power, and telling us about how it operated, how safe it was, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember as a kid growing up in Vegas, hearing all the wonderful benefits of nuclear power, and also sitting in the classroom and feeling the earth shake from the test out at the test site. So it was a kind of a dichotomy of existences, and as we put a lot of it together, as we talk about this future of technology, power becomes a real critical thing to talk about. I really think that nuclear power could have been the saving grace for this country, for its dependency that we currently have on oil. And there's so much debate about all these kinds of things, but then we have the disaster in Japan and the problems that are occurring as a result of that, and we've seen our own 3 Mile Island incidents here in the U.S. And reactors that have shut down. But what people, I think, don't realize is the current reactor technology now is 20 to 40 years old. There hasn't been a lot of new development in nuclear reactor technology. So we're dealing with very, very old systems that were designed to operate for a very long time. But they've reached the limit of that. And there's a new TV series on called Manhattan. It's about the Manhattan Project, and it's kind of interesting watching this TV show, this series, and from today's perspective, looking what they were doing back in the early 40s and trying to perfect a nuclear device to be the device to end all wars. And they make a comment that in World War I, chlorine gas was supposed to be the weapon that would prevent any more world wars. And we didn't learn that lesson, and we certainly haven't learned from Hiroshima and Nagasaki either. The proliferation of nuclear power and the side effect of the access to fissionable material is scary, and I think we see that happening. So as we look at technology, we have to look at what power, and unfortunately, it appears that we're going to stay away from, I say unfortunately, that's a personal opinion, from nuclear power, but fortunately we're going to stay away from it because the potential to abuse it is so great, and we need.
That's true.
And so as much as I like to think that would be a wonderful panacea for our power problems, it's not going to be. The name of our company is NuTesla, N-U-Tesla. Nu is the Greek letter used in electronics for frequency, and what we do is based upon the resonant frequency discoveries of Nikola Tesla over 100 years ago. And we have nothing to do with the car company Tesla Motors, but Tesla's been in the news a lot lately. They've just selected Nevada, interestingly, as their home state for their battery plant.
Yep, just I think that was just announced yesterday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think that's an amazing growth industry right there. Is the improvements in batteries and storage technology for power, and there's some amazing things happening in that. I was speaking with somebody who is working with, you think about integrated circuits, and these little itty bitty circuits that, 1 inch square has literally a billion transistors on it. Well, if you think about a billion transistors, and instead you were to make all of those capacitors, which can store energy, not a billion because of the size difference, but if you think about having little wafers with lots and lots of capacitors to store the energy, and then having arrays of transistors on the edges to control that, they're working on a battery for a cell phone that is literally the size of your SIM card.
Oh my God.
Huh. Right? And it'll operate your phone for a week on a battery that size. Huh. And it can be recharged almost instantaneously, but it's based on this whole concept of miniaturizing this and then controlling that to allow that to work. It's not ready yet, but there's a lot of money and time going into that type of battery technology. So I think one of the things we're going to see in the future are tremendous strides in storing power and making it more usable for these small electronic devices that we're seeing. So batteries, battery technology is one of the biggest areas.
Yeah. Well, not only battery technology improving and able to deliver more power, but also the fact that our machines are requiring less power.
Right.
It's like you said, almost everything's kind of being run off a USB now for the most part. So interesting stuff.
Oh, it is. It is. One of the things that Tesla discovered, and this goes back to 1892. Is what he called electromedicine or electrotherapy. He was doing work with what's called inductive power, where the energy was transmitted to the body through a set of coils. The electricity didn't touch the skin. Right. It wasn't transcutaneous, if you will, it didn't shock you, but it was inductive.
It's like you say, I know I have a sonic toothbrush that does the same thing. There's no contacts on it. It's induction charging, just two coils that are picking it back and forth. Fascinating.
And wireless charging is another area that's really growing. In fact, there's actually 3 different standards in the wireless charging technology. There's the one that's like the Sonicare toothbrush. It's called a closely coupled inductive charging. You've got to have the device directly on top of it. Then there's loosely coupled standard, I believe it's called Qi, QI, like the body's energy Qi. The Qi standard, and that allows there to be a little bit of separation, and they use flat coils, which I find interesting because Tesla favored flat coils. But then there's a new technology that was discovered, quote unquote discovered, up at MIT in 2007 that uses resonance, where they have a tuned circuit that they can put in the ceiling, and they use a tuned circuit in the device, and most inductive things send out power. It just goes out like a big donut field around the charger, whatever it's acting. But this tuned energy can permeate the room, but you don't absorb any of it unless you're tuned.
Unless you're tuned, right.
And so they have a coil in your device, and they're doing some amazing stuff. This is actually based on the original work that Tesla did when he talked about wireless power.
Wasn't that what he was trying to build in Wycliffe, New Jersey?
Yes.
And he was I think it was Westinghouse that was funding him, and then they found out they couldn't charge for it or something, and they pulled his funding, if I remember the story correct.
It was, well, he was, yeah, Westinghouse, it was Rockefeller.
I'm sorry, it wasn't Westinghouse, it was Rockefeller, yeah.
And yeah, when he realized that there wasn't a way to meter it,
right.
Then he's like, no. And so this whole idea of resonance is what's critical. And I guess my point is that this electromedicine, there was a Frenchman, Dr. D'Arsenval, who was building devices in France in the early 1890s that were duplicates basically of what Tesla had done. And when Tesla's mother passed away, it devastated him, but it took him to Europe for her funeral and services. And on his way back, he stopped in France to meet this doctor who was using all of his devices, but not giving any credit to Tesla. And he said that upon meeting the good doctor, he discovered that it was more a matter of case of French pride, and it was actually the French government and the press who were refusing to acknowledge that these were Tesla's ideas. And the doctor said, of course they're yours. You were the one you inspired me to do this. And so he said he immediately dropped all ideas of taking any actions against him. But these devices, by the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, medical books were loaded with descriptions of how to build and how to use these devices, electromedicine, to treat illnesses. Electrotherapy, electromedicine, we're not talking shock therapy here. Right. We're talking true electromedicine was the standard for treatment. It wasn't until the publication of a report called now I'm having a senior moment, the Flexner Report, the Flexner Report, which came out in 1910, that was funded by the Rockefellers, who had big investments in pharmaceuticals. And so they came out because medical industry in the early 1900s, there was no standardized training or education or certification process. The American Medical Association had been formed about 10, 12 years previously, but it hadn't really caught on yet. What was interesting is that after the Flexner Report came out in 1910, one of the things that they discovered was, one of their findings is that unless something can be explained using the scientific method, then it's not real. So it's just quackery as far as that. Well, what's interesting is that doctors, all of their training is in Latin. And they don't get trained in classic physics, especially not in electromagnetics by any means.
Right.
And electrical engineers, all of our training is in Greek. And they don't teach us physiology and anatomy beyond basic stuff. So you've got these two different sides. One speaks Latin, one speaks Greek, and they're not talking to each other. And interestingly, Tesla in 1892 published, he was speaking before a group, and he said, any competent electrical engineer can safely apply these currents to the body. But it remains to the physician to describe how these affect the body. Tesla himself acknowledged that as smart as he was, he says, I can do this and I can cause a person to be cured, but I can't tell you how it works. You need the doctors to do that. But the doctors didn't understand how it worked. So as a result of this Flexner Report, electromedicine became known as a quackery. It was like snake oil to these people. And it fell out of use. Well, interestingly, when you take a technology that has been helpful, but then you say, well, it's no longer helpful, it's just snake oil, if you will, then the corollary is, if it's not helpful, then it must not be harmful, other than in its obvious forms of electrocution. So what happened was, frequencies that had been used to heal people and were no longer considered healthy, frequencies then were no longer considered harmful. And so electrical engineers stopped worrying about creating devices that had healthy frequencies. So take something as simple as your bedside alarm clock that has a little fluorescent numeric display. That numeric display is made up of little segments, and they're scanned and they turn on and off in order to reduce the amount of power that's consumed by that bedside alarm clock. Well, the engineer that designed that picked a number for the scan rate, we call it, the refresh rate of that little numeric display that was efficient to use, lower cost to build, without any consideration of whether or not that bedside alarm clock was using a scan rate that was a frequency that was healthy for the body or not.
Interesting.
Our studies found that one of the biggest problems for people with insomnia were their bedside alarm clocks.
Interesting.
That display has a refresh rate that can interfere. So one of the things that we've done with our technology is there was one doctor who understood what Tesla was doing, and that was Dr. Royal Rife.
Royal Rife in San Diego, yeah, in the 20s.
In the 20s. Yeah. And he was using a neon bulb. The neon light was invented by Tesla, and he was using a radio transmitter to energize that neon bulb and cause it to emit these large electromagnetic waves. There's more efficient ways to do that, but that was how he was doing it in the 20s. And he had a very, very high cure rate for for cancer and other untreatable diseases. And without going to the whole history about Rife and all of that, the point wasn't that these frequencies that he chose, there are frequencies that heal and frequencies that kill. And in Rife's name, people have been doing research ever since then, and you can go online and find tables of Rife frequencies that are used for a myriad of different applications. And so we use those Rife frequencies to, as the basis of all the frequencies that we emit with our instruments, so that we can help heal the body, help the body heal itself, is a better way to say that. And we always present those frequencies following an ultradian rhythm. Whether we start with a low frequency and build and go back down, or start high and go down and come back up. And we always try to follow a 90-minute cycle. Our bodies run.
Which is basically what the ultradian rhythm is it not? Isn't it basically built on a? It's the reason that when we do presentations and seminars, we take a break every 90 minutes because we lose our focus, and that's the ultradian rhythm, basically.
Right, and that's why TV shows are 60 minutes long.
Because
they want you to come back. They leave you hanging after 60 minutes. It's not enough. But when you go pay $10 to see a movie, how long is that movie typically?
Yep.
90
minutes. Yeah,
yes.
Right in there.
Like you got your money's worth. The psychology of ultradian rhythms is so deeply embedded, we don't even realize that it's around. But we found it by helping restore that rhythm. People can sleep better, can think better, and there's amazing stuff. One of the areas.
This is what you do. I mean, this is we should tell people a little bit about your products and some of the things that you can how they can find you, because these are actually the products that you create, are they not?
They are.
Yeah,
On NuTesla.com, NuTesla.com, or if you misspell it, NEW, it'll still get you there. And one of the things that we have products that help people sleep, that help improve their awareness that you can use when you're meditating. The Tesla jewels that, like you have, that emit the different colored lights. We've got groups across the country using that with children with autism. They were developed specifically to address a need to help children with autism, to help bring the parents and the child onto the same frequency, the same wave, so they could communicate better. We don't see autism as a disease. Autism isn't the problem. We've got to catch up with these kids that have autism.
That's it.
And so these lights are helping us to do that. It's creating a common base to help bring that connection around. But the other thing about the lights that we like is that people that we have them in our home, and people walk in and they say, it feels like there's angels in here.
I have it over at my desk, actually. It's right behind my computer, so it lights up the whole room when I'm not looking sometimes. Amazing.
These higher beings are beings of light. And so by resonating their energies, we attract like energies to us. And that's important that we understand that. So we want to attract like energies. It's the law of attraction. It's just basic physics. If you want something and you think about that and you focus that and send your energy and put that out into the universe, that's what's going to come back to you. If you are depressed and have all these depressing thoughts and words, that's what's going to come back to you as well. And so we want to help people raise their vibrational energy level to a higher level of awareness. And electromedicine is, to me, one of the areas that is just going to be amazing, because we're going to see a return to that. Right. People not taking a pill for every ill, a shot for whatever you got. We're going to see people using energy medicine to truly heal them. And that's, we've been doing experiments. We actually have an instrument that we haven't sold yet, that we've been doing our own internal investigations with. And we're in the midst of battling with the patent office on its patent. And when that's settled, then we'll be able to do that. So you can watch the website, you'll see that as well. But this is an area of tremendous growth. But one of the things that I want to talk about real briefly is flicker fusion, critical flicker fusion. Mm-hmm. Flicker fusion is the point at which a flashing light appears to fuse into a solid light. Have you ever heard of that term?
Yep. And doesn't everybody have their own flicker fusion rate, basically?
Yes. Each person, you can't compare one person's to another.
Right.
In 1945, the Army Air Corps used flicker fusion to measure the recovery of pilots coming back from World War II that had post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh, fascinating.
They took 50 healthy pilots and 50 with PTSD and put them through training, and they used a projector with a spinning disc and a white light flashing in this room, and they would adjust the speed of the spinning disc, and they would measure the frequency at which the pilots saw that fuse to a solid light. And they found that as they recovered, as their frequency got higher. So the less stress in somebody's life, the more healthy they are, the higher their flicker fusion frequency. Every one of our products includes the ability to measure and report this. Now we call it a wellness number and not a frequency, because it's too difficult to try to do that with just a single LED that we flash, to give you your tens and ones. But it allows you to measure your own personal wellness. So you can see if the instrument's helping you or not. And you can then track your wellness. And I believe the time is coming when knowing your flicker fusion frequency will be more important than knowing your cholesterol or blood pressure levels.
I think you're onto something big here. Wonderful. James, it's been a pleasure to have you here with us, my friend. You've enlightened us again. We could probably talk for days without running out of things to say. Thank you for being here today and for sharing your wealth of information with all of us and your vision for the future. It's going to be an exciting time for all of us.
Thank you, Steve. It is.
All right, and I'll return you all to the studio now. Thank you.